Hi, this is Pixie, do another video. So what is going on in the world? Well, big yawn. So, with the situation in Russia and where it's taken it, he says, well basically Putin says the operation is going well because the operation is to stoke and bring about World War III, I feel, because he needs to get the West to break the agreements that they've got set in place when it comes to protecting, countries and all sorts of things. I don't think it's an issue if basically supplying a neutral country, because they normally could buy the weapons. All that's happened is that they're getting donated rather than they're buying them. And if you look at sort of a corporate view of the world, removing their client is bad for business, because they're not going to buy weapons if they've been annihilated, and if their land's been taken over, they've got nothing to bargain with. So from this corporate way of business and money first and all these sorts of initiatives they have, and sustainability is that setting up things in the Ukraine to weaponise them would be healthy for their interests. And the sanctions generate certain limitations, but a lot of money from Putin's also been stored around the world, and he has also played out so many different scenarios and steps ahead. It's like a game, so but he's more of they say he's more of a poker player, so he's a bit more of it playing those sorts of games. Often when politicians speak on TV, always consider the opposite of what they're saying, because they might say it's going well, but actually it's telling you it's going terribly, but they want you to believe it's going well, because that's what they're doing with the games. Play you one way, makes it a lot easier for them, I guess. And also, from a business point of view, they got people investing in them, they got people that want to see results. I mean, is Putin a lone agent, or is he controlled in some way, or connected to another group, maybe a group that's been financing him for years? He has to follow through. But I feel that what it's bringing about, so if you put your money into certain things, you stash it away, you generate some sort of war situation, and then possibly when everything blows over, you'll have this money, and what you're aiming to do is generate a reset and a financial reset on things. Because a lot of it, we have this sort of like the debt system that we run on, and the gold and anything of true value is all stashed away. So if you destroy the debt system, which is basically held in data that you owe this much to the state and therefore you pay under this agreement, and whatever, because the banks have sort of integrated with the state at certain levels, with the Bank of England and so on, and this is what it sort of meshes into these corporations. But if you remove that layer, people will have to revert back to a different type of currency. This is what the thing about the crypto is, which is equivalent to keeping your gold and so on, is it's not something they regulate, and it's another layer. So it's suddenly integrated with the technology of the metaverse, cyberspace, the internet. And it did originally start in some of the banking systems, is that they were creating a system where it was paperless by using cards, by using chips, by using technology, but it was centralised in that they can manage it and they didn't have to print any paper off. And these ideas obviously collectively went into other people's heads, and they thought, well, how can we create an encrypted a product based in data that went forward, and then it was eventually using different technologies So what makes it special is these cryptos is if it's a trustless system, so I don't have to turn around and say, you know, to the other person, is this actually made of gold, or is this worth such and such? I mean, you could have a fake Bitcoin, but there's a way to check these things, and also with a trust list, I don't have to ask anyone about the information on it. I can trade with it, and it's just an accepted thing, and because it's validated by computers, they look at it and think, yep, the code's fine, yep, everything's great, yep. But it's not foolproof. I mean, if there was somebody that printed off, was able to produce more Bitcoin, even though they said they couldn't produce more Bitcoin, there was some way you went around it. So yeah, I think there's a financial reset in place to come, and it's come in different layers. And the thing is, with the virus that come out, that caused the pandemic, if we're looking at what's going on in China at the moment, they're having trouble controlling the Omicron, so they don't have a vaccine for something. So if they had made the virus, you'd think they'd have an effective vaccine. Because they boasted that how they had it all under control, it made people more suspicious. But they had it controlled through social engineering methods. It could be they don't have the technology to mass produce a vaccine, and so they're just locking people up. And then once they can confirm they haven't got it, they can let them back out again. But they're sort of producing this image that is being maintained. So for biolabs and research, you know, if it's a weapon that's been tailored or developed, it's probably not from China, or if it is, it's a section of China that's not really being controlled. I mean, to be honest, what happens if it's got a Taiwan connection? We just don't know. I know you're not saying that because it might invade. And then the other thing to think about, so you've got this reset, but how could you avoid the fallout from it? So I mean, I don't know if you've ever thought of nuclear. There are weapons worse than nuclear weapons that are at the disposal of the Russians. This like this Novichok stuff is, you can put an egg cup of it and then you can basically decimate a city. I mean, what we need to do is just fire it into a rain cloud above the country, and there we go. And it also reminds me of there was this crazy there's a thing about video about somebody who's like a time traveller, and I'll let you go. I think they're going down the direction. That's ended. And yeah, basically the world has no people on it, and he just wanders around filming stuff. And I was thinking, if that is actually true, it's the events that are coming up now that may leave people with nothing, and they just vanish off the face of the earth, whatever comes next. I mean, I don't think it was radiation, because it is, but then again, he hasn't journeyed, and his time travelling type TikTok videos he produces, he can go anywhere around Spain. He could be editing all the stuff and removing it. It's just sort of very questionable, because he seems to be in funny places taking films and doing videos. But you know, if it was true, it's not likely to be radioactive. Otherwise, he would be unwell walking around Spain with sort of radioactive thing. But then again, some years later, there could be radioactive dust clouds that are blowing around, and the rain and maybe the soil. But then, if he's eating out of cans, there's be a point where he takes in some radiation and becomes unwell. Because if you breathe the stuff in, but if it's a biological agent, then that may have died away. It might have had a half-life. It's been so deadly, everyone gets ill, or if it's something toxic, it'll break down. So we'll have to see. But yeah, this Novichok's probably much worse than nuclear weapons, so I don't want to be worrying so much. And this sort of different scenarios is that the West could fund people within Russia to support them to unhinge the government or do whatever. There's likely to be a clampdown, and I did predict that if you war on them, you're warring themselves. So which he's doing, which is to purify his Russians, and make an example of the ones in different ways. They just disappear. They just be detention camps where nobody comes back alive, or maybe they come back lobotomized or damaged in some way. And then you can say, oh well, they got long COVID and developed some things, and you might have given them some sort of neurotoxin that's basically giving them brain damage. The stuff about it could be all propaganda, so just saying it as it is. Because here in the West, you can talk about propaganda. I think once you've been exposed to enough of it, you'll quite happily say, well, it's an interesting story, but I don't know how true it is. I mean, I don't think people are that blind in the West. There's this idea that everyone gets brainwashed in the West and requires correction in some way. They don't. It just needs to be left alone, I think. Because the problem is not the choice of information, it's the level of correspondence to certain information. You just can't get away from stuff and you're constantly being bombarded by information, then it becomes a lot more difficult to manage and deal with. You don't get enough time to process it. And like a lot of people, I mean, I quite liked Putin, but people are considering what he's doing now is crazy. I spoke to some Romanian bloke. He said, he didn't have an issue with him before, but he thinks what's going on now doesn't make any sense. It's crazy, and I think it is. You just take it to other levels. So anything to get the war on. The best thing to do is try to figure out as much things as he would have planned for. I mean, we might be looking at things from him inside a bunker. He wants the world to attack the people to legitimise his behaviour. Because it costs money, wars, and like I say about the reset, you can clear the decks straight off. You say, well, everyone's dead, so no one's going to complain about it. It's but if there's enough people alive that got an issue with your regime, so I think he would eventually self-destruct. I think it's about pushing his buttons so he goes to the point of where people just say no to him. I think that will happen. I mean, he tried to create a personality cult where he had him as riding bears and all sorts of things, and I don't know if he's trying to win people over, but then people always wanted to see him as the baddie, and maybe he's given into that image, or he says, fair enough, I'll be, if I can't be a good person, I'll be a bad person. I do what I'm good at. But then again, the smoke screen of being this great guy in some ways, or sort of standing up against the West, because I know that West can be quite domineering, and I know about the imperialism, and I know about the mind games and dividing people's thinking, because it makes them easier to manipulate and stuff. I mean, we're all aware of that. That's government mentality. That's what governments do, afraid. They're not the West. It's the inner circle of government, and how they want, and people of interest. People have got the financial control to generate outcomes. They think, well, it's favourable if we go this way with it. And so a lot of that happened. Let me go, oh, I'm so tired, man. Cars and things in the way. I attempt to get a drink, I can't be bothered, I guess I'll go home. So I mean, really, there's a plan there. I mean, he's not crazy. He's just he's looked at, like you say, he's the poker player. He's looked at his hand, he's looked at his cards, he's looked at what chips he's got left, and he's thinking, I've got to go for the kill now. I've got to go for the main thing. There's too many people who want results. I'm not getting them. We tried these different methods. It's not working. We go this route. And maybe it's like you can fight against the dark side, but at some point it's come out. So it's like Anakin Skywalker or something like that. He's turned into Darth Vader. Because he's not like for any dictator, any tyrant or whatever, there might have a percentage of them that might be crazy, but there's some humanity in it. Whether they've chosen to discard it for whatever reason, that's up to them. But it wasn't always bad, and just maybe they just start making bad choices. I think that there could be a point where maybe his time is limited, but then has he got a protege? Is somebody going to take over that's when he's not there? I mean, what's his other plans? Maybe he's going to have Putin clones, or maybe with his bunker he's got with, like I mentioned, the financial reset. Maybe it's also a reset on the Russian people, and then you might have the elite ones you got there, and then you also got people that you might have like as breeders, and to have his offspring. Could be some dark agenda there. Get vials of sperm down there. Because if you haven't got a legacy, then what are you going to do? So you create a big war, you potentially could die. You've got this idea it'll make Russia greater, and sort of de-westernize them and stuff like that. Basically, it put them through loads of pain and misery, and then you'll twist that around to say, well, that's because of what the West did to us, and have people that are just confused, and then the next generation will hear the things from their parents, not believe them, and then rebel, and they just create a situation that goes around this cycle. It doesn't work. I mean, I don't think it's going to work. I mean, the other thing is, it's like, say, other powers will fill the vacuum in, because if you strip away all the fancy bits, which were considered the non-essentials, like different networks, access to YouTube in Russia and all sorts of other stuff, they've all pulled away from that. And then you've got the core what's left. You've got the kind of the root of corruption. You'll see what's left behind, and then people will just say, well, this is not for us, we don't want that. People think just let them cross the road. That's what you call people feeling entitled somewhere. I just wander across the road. And we're young and we've had a drink, so we need to go across the road in front of the car. I don't know. Anyway, we'll just see how it goes. But I think this is the grand reset. And if it is it a part of something bigger? And where did COVID start? We all think it's the Wuhan, but that might be a piece of the puzzle. Ooh.